Well, it was a very long process. It started probably about 3 years ago, and I was feeling very ill. I've been through the emergency rooms in and out for months and years. They thought I had lupus. Some of the symptoms I've had, they thought I might have multiple sclerosis. They also thought I had cancer. My symptoms were numbness and tingling in the legs, my hands. It got to the point where I couldn't even move my right leg or my right arm. It's very difficult. I do a lot of computer work, and there would be times where I couldn't even move my actual arms from the computer. So it just kind of gradually kept going on and going on, and nobody could understand what was going on leading up to the actual event. What happened is that I went into work and I couldn't move my right side of my body, and I fell down. And at that point, the symptoms were a stroke. They thought I had a stroke. I probably had a stroke at that point. I was issued, they called 911. The MS unit came out and transported me as a stroke victim. Got into the hospital, and at that point, CT scans were done and showed that there was no activity of a stroke. And at that point, the doctor further decided to go into the neck and see if there was something going on in the neck, maybe the neck area. At that point, they actually came out and diagnosed me with what they call a 70% spinal cord compression. Basically, my body was just kind of shutting down, and my kidneys were shutting down, and my lungs were. At that point, they wanted to do the operation within hours, and at that point, I told them no, because my daughter was also seen by Dr. Patel and Dr. Raman, and she had a 360 fusion by them, and had great outcome. And so I thought, no, stop, no. And I said, I want to call my surgeon. And at that point, I called Dr. Patel, my daughter did, and said, hey, this is what's happening with my mom. She's at the hospital, and she needs to get a hold of you. Dr. Patel and their group are amazing. They got into the website, got into my MRI, and noticed that what they called a compression was a C5 myeloreticulopathy. So at that point, I was held there until arrangements were made for us to go into another hospital. That Dr. Patel and Dr. Raman had made every effort to get me in as soon as possible. The next day, probably 2 o'clock, I was in the operating room. And amazingly, I came out of recovery and I was able to move my leg and my arm. I was able to pick up my leg and actually pick it up 7 inches off the bed, when I wouldn't be able to even do that before I actually had this episode. At that point, everything was wonderful. I was able to start breathing better. I was able to start, my kidneys were starting to work. My fluid was coming out of my body. You got to remember, at this time, I sometimes would wake up and looking like I was 9 months pregnant, and I wasn't. So just to be able to wake up and look at myself and not knowing and not seeing this big stomach, and be able to go to, the ladies' room, and to just get to that point was amazing. The recovery in itself was great. I did go through some rehab. Right now, I'm sitting here in front of you, telling you, here I am. I'm only maybe 12 weeks post-op, and I'm able to do things that I haven't been able to do in 4 years, and it's pain-free. There's sometimes, I might get a little tired, but I'm conditioned. But as far as everything else, I would definitely recommend Dr. Raman, Dr. Patel to any of my members, because there's nobody The hardest thing about this is not knowing. And for me, not knowing for 4 years that this could have been looked at by an orthopedics and had this thing fixed, and to know that that's what they did. And so I owe my life to them. I owe, my family owes them for me, because I'm a mother and also grandmother. So my life is very, very great now, thanks to them. And I thank them for my daughter, because she was walking around with a broken back and nobody knew about it. So that's the greatest gift of all, is having doctors like Dr. Raman and Dr. Patel and his great staff. And the coordination between him and the surgical centers that he's done this are amazing as well, because taking into consideration patient care, aftercare is also important as the actual surgery itself. So it's amazing what these people have done with me and my family. So I do recommend him, and I do trust him, and I would recommend that you would use them, because I'm living proof, and I'm sitting right here talking to you today. And if I would have gone home, I wouldn't be here. I was told that if I had gone home, I would have died in my sleep. So that's my story, Jimmy.